There's a kind of ache that doesn't hurt, but it lingers. A quiet feeling like something important is missing, and you can't quite name it. You wake up, check your phone, scroll through the headlines, drink your coffee, go to work. You laugh, you smile, you say, "I'm fine," and maybe you are. But somewhere, underneath it all, there's a sense that something has been left behind. Not on your to-do list, not in your calendar, but in you. Have you ever felt that subtle distance between the life you're living and the life your soul remembers? It's not about success or failure. It's not even about being happy or sad. It's something deeper. Like hearing a song you haven't heard in years, and suddenly feeling tears in your eyes without knowing why. Like walking into a forest and forgetting your name for a moment, but remembering your truth. That feeling is the beginning of remembering. You see, the modern world has trained us to forget. We're taught to focus outward on goals, roles, titles, appearances. We're rewarded for being productive, for staying busy, for fitting in. But almost no one teaches us how to be whole, how to be quiet enough to hear the whisper beneath the noise. The whisper that says, "You're not lost. You've just forgotten who you are." And maybe that's why you're here now. Not by accident, but because some part of you ancient, untouched by time, has been quietly guiding you back. Not to become someone new, but to return to someone true. This is where the sacred technique begins. It's not a ritual. It's not a dogma. It doesn't belong to any religion. And it doesn't require belief. It's older than language, softer than thought. It lives in the pause between your breaths, in the stillness between heartbeats. It's not something you learn. It's something you remember. And that's what makes it sacred. They once called it forbidden, not because it harmed, but because it freed. Because when a soul remembers who it truly is, it can no longer be controlled, no longer manipulated, no longer afraid. When you remember your essence, you stop chasing approval. You stop living someone else's life. You begin to live from your own center. And that kind of freedom, that kind of awakening, can't be sold. It can't be programmed. It simply is. The sacred technique is a pathway back to that remembering, a guide through the layers of noise, distraction, and conditioning. It doesn't ask you to become better. It asks you to become clearer, to gently remove everything that was never really yours, so what's underneath can shine. And it begins with resonance, not with an idea, but with a feeling, a vibration, a subtle shift inside you that says, "This feels real." It doesn't shout, it doesn't convince, it simply aligns. That's why you're not being asked to believe in anything here. Just to listen, not just with your ears, but with your being. Because what you're about to remember isn't outside of you. It's not in this video. It's not in my words. It's in you. It always has been. And now, it's waking up. So what the sacred technique really is. Imagine your soul as a pure note, a sound so clear, so beautiful, that if you heard it just once, you'd weep without knowing why. It's the sound of your essence, the vibration of who you were before the world told you who to be. But over time, that note became buried beneath noise, beliefs, expectations, comparisons, traumas, ideas about what you should do, how you should look, what you should want. It's like static on a radio at first, just a little, then more, until the original song is almost completely drowned out. And so, we go through life feeling like something's missing. Not because the soul is gone, but because its signal is buried under interference. The sacred technique is not about adding more to your life. It's not about chasing spiritual highs or collecting mystical knowledge. It's the opposite. It's about stripping away everything that doesn't resonate with your truth until what remains is so familiar, so unmistakable, that you don't question it anymore. You just know. This is me. This knowing doesn't arrive as thought. It arrives as resonance, like when you hear someone speak from the heart, and something inside you responds without words. Like when you read a line in a book and your whole body softens. That feeling, that hum beneath the surface, is resonance, and your soul recognizes it instantly. Every living being has a unique frequency, not metaphorically, literally. Science calls it electromagnetic signature. Mystics call it soul tone. But they're pointing to the same truth. Who you are is not a concept. It's a vibration. The sacred technique works not by changing your frequency, but by helping you return to the one that was always yours. And to do that, it moves through 3 quiet but powerful phases, each one peeling away a layer of noise so that your original signal can shine through again. But let's be clear, this isn't a quick fix. It's not about transcending your humanity. It's about inhabiting it fully, from the inside out. It's not about escaping pain or pretending to be at peace. It's about creating space for truth to emerge, gently, naturally, like light returning to a room you didn't realize had windows. And you don't need to be in a temple or on a mountaintop to begin. You can be in your kitchen, in your car, in the middle of a crowded day. The only thing you need is space inside a moment of willingness to pause and listen. The sacred technique doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives in silence, in breath, in the still recognition that nothing outside of you can give you what's already within you. That what you've been searching for has been waiting not to be discovered, but to be remembered. You'll feel it when it starts, maybe during a walk, or in the middle of a sentence, or while staring at the ceiling before sleep. You'll feel something shift. The noise won't be as loud. Your breath will deepen. Your body will soften. And something inside will whisper, not in language, but in presence. Yes, this is the way back. And so, the journey begins, not by adding more, but by subtracting, by clearing the interference, by coming home to your own frequency. The first phase of the sacred technique is also the most uncomfortable because it doesn't begin with light. It begins with seeing what has covered the light, not with judgment, but with honesty. We've all been shaped by something: parents, teachers, culture, society, sometimes even by silence, things that were never said, love that was withheld, dreams that were quietly dismissed. And slowly, layer by layer, we became someone the world could recognize, but often not someone we could feel. Unlearning the false self means we begin to turn inward and ask, who told me this is who I am? Where did this belief come from? Do I truly want this, or was I taught to want it? These aren't easy questions, because sometimes the answers point to people we love. Sometimes they point to moments we've buried, and sometimes they reveal how much of our life has been shaped by fear rather than by truth. Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror, but the glass has been painted over layer after layer of other people's voices. You're too much. You're not enough. You need to succeed to matter. You must be perfect to be loved. You're falling behind. You'll never make it. And here's the thing, we didn't choose these messages. They were absorbed when we were too young to question. We built our personalities around them. We called them reality, but they are not reality. They are programming, echoes, scripts we inherited, not truths we were born with. And the first sacred act is simply to see them, not to fix them, not to fight them, but to witness them. When a painful thought arises like, "I'll never be enough," instead of believing it, you pause. You breathe. You ask, is this really mine? Who does this voice sound like? And do I want to carry this any longer? You're not erasing your past. You're choosing what you take forward. Sometimes this means grieving the years you spent trying to become someone you never needed to be. Sometimes it means feeling anger, not because you hate others, but because you realize what was taken from you, your softness, your playfulness, your truth. And underneath that grief, that fire, that unraveling, there's freedom. Because what was built from fear can fall. And what's left standing after that is you. Unlearning is not a one-time act. It's a sacred discipline of noticing again and again when you're living from your truth, and when you've slipped back into someone else's story. And when you notice, you gently return. This is where the false self begins to dissolve, not because you destroy it, but because you stop feeding it. Like fog that lifts when you stop trying to chase it away. You don't need to fight the false, you just need to see clearly. And what's not real will fall on its own. And in that falling, a quiet space opens up. A space where the next phase begins the reawakening of your inner sense. Once the noise begins to fade, something softer starts to emerge. Not louder, just clearer. It's not a voice in your head or a feeling in your chest. It's not logic, and it's not emotion either. It's something more ancient, more immediate, a quiet awareness that simply knows. This is your inner sense, your original compass, the part of you that doesn't analyze or compare, but perceives directly, like light touching skin. You've likely felt it before, maybe in a split second when you met someone for the first time, and just knew whether you could trust them or not. Or when you walked away from a situation, and your whole body exhaled in relief before your mind even understood why. Or when you stood under the night sky and, without trying, felt connected to something vast, something eternal. That knowing, that recognition, comes from your inner sense. The sacred technique helps you reconnect with this part of yourself, not by force, but by tuning. Because like a radio, the signal was never gone. It was simply overwhelmed by louder stations, your thoughts, your stress, your programming. But once you begin to clear the interference, the original signal returns. This reconnection doesn't happen in your head. It begins in your body. Through simple practices, slowing your breath, feeling the weight of your body against the earth, resting your hand over your heart, or closing your eyes and letting a single image arise. A flame, a mirror, a blooming lotus. These aren't fantasies. They are bridges. Symbols speak in the language of the soul. They bypass logic and go straight to memory, not the kind stored in your brain, but the kind you carry in your energy. When you breathe into these symbols with focus and softness, something within begins to respond. You don't need to force anything. You just need to create the space for it to appear. And when it does, it often arrives not with answers, but with presence, a warmth, a sudden ease, a shift in perspective that you didn't reason your way into, but simply felt. That's how your inner sense speaks, not with arguments or evidence, but with resonance. And the more you listen to it, the more it speaks. Not louder, but more often. Not more complex, but more clear. This is the sense that lets you move through life with gentleness, even when the world is loud. It's the sense that guides you back when your mind is spinning. It's the feeling that says, wait, when everyone around you says, go. And yes, when logic says, don't you dare. It's not reckless. It's not impulsive. It's rooted, deep, and alive. And here's the most beautiful part. You don't have to build this sense. You were born with it. You just have to stop talking over it. Stop doubting it and start treating it as real. Because it is. As this inner sense awakens, you begin to see through different eyes. You no longer look for signs and validations in the outer world. You feel them inside you. You no longer ask, what should I do, but rather, what feels like alignment? You begin to make decisions not just from thought or emotion, but from coherence, a sense that your heart, your breath, your presence, and your direction are all flowing in the same rhythm. And when you begin to live this way, something beautiful starts to happen. You're not just remembering how to feel, you're remembering how to trust yourself again. And that trust is what leads you into the deepest part of the journey. The moment when your whole being begins to resonate with a frequency you didn't know you were waiting for, the vibration of your true name. There comes a moment on this path not marked by fireworks or fanfare, when something simply clicks inside you. Not as a thought, not even as a feeling, but as a deep, undeniable recognition. It might happen during silence, while you're brushing your teeth, walking down a familiar street, or lying awake at night. Nothing looks different, but everything feels different. Something inside you settles. Not because you found the answer, but because you finally stopped looking for it in the wrong place. And in that stillness, a vibration rises, not loud, but steady, not new, but ancient. It doesn't say anything. It simply is. And, without needing to prove or explain, this is me. That's what it means to come into resonance with your true name. Ancient traditions spoke of this name not as a word you could say, but as a frequency your soul carries across lifetimes. A unique vibration that belongs to no one else. It's not something you can invent. It's something you recognize. Like a melody you haven't heard in years, yet somehow remember every note. You don't know how or why, but it feels like home. This resonance doesn't come through effort. You can't force it, chase it, or fake it. It comes when you're no longer pretending, when your actions match your essence, when you stop performing and start being, when you make choices not to be seen, but to be aligned. Imagine you're walking barefoot in nature. No one's watching, no deadlines, no pressure, just the wind, the earth, your breath. In that moment, your body relaxes into its natural rhythm. You're not trying to be anything. You simply are. That's the kind of purity we're talking about. That's the kind of resonance the soul responds to. And when it comes, you'll feel it not as excitement, but as peace. Not as energy rising up, but as depth expanding inward. Your breath slows. Your mind quiets. You're not above life. You're within it. Fully, present, real. This resonance isn't a final destination. It's not a now I'm enlightened moment. It's a threshold, a shift, a doorway opening inside you. Once it opens, you can't go back to who you were pretending to be. Not because you're better, but because pretending suddenly feels heavy, dishonest, unnecessary. You might still do the same things, go to work, talk to friends, make dinner. But everything is different now. Because now, you're there. You're no longer scattered across worries and roles and expectations. You're in your life, breathing through it, living from the soul. And people will notice. They may not know what changed, but they'll feel something in your presence. Maybe they'll describe it as calm, or kindness, or clarity. But what they're really sensing is coherence. The rare and sacred state of someone who is no longer divided inside. Someone who has heard their true name, not with the ears, but with the heart. This resonance will guide you, not like a map, but like a tuning fork. When something aligns with it, you'll feel expansion, warmth, ease. When something doesn't, you'll feel resistance, tightening, dullness. And the more you live in resonance, the more obvious these signals become. That doesn't mean life will be without challenge. But even in difficulty, you'll move differently. You'll listen more deeply, speak more truthfully, and choose not from fear, but from truth. Because now, you remember. And when a soul remembers, it no longer begs to belong. It simply belongs. Not because the world makes space for it, but because it makes space within itself. And that is where everything begins to change. After that moment of resonance, life doesn't suddenly become perfect. The traffic still exists. The inbox still fills. People still forget to say thank you. But you are different. Because now, you're no longer navigating the world from the surface. You're moving from the depth. Something has shifted. And it's not just how you feel. It's how you exist. You begin to respond rather than react. You don't suppress your emotions, but you no longer let them drive the wheel. There's space now between the feeling and the action, a gentle pause where your soul has a chance to speak first. You find yourself breathing more before answering, listening more before speaking, asking quietly inside, what would truth do right now? Your presence deepens, and with it, your language changes. You speak less to be understood, and more to connect. You choose words that carry softness, not noise. You no longer speak to impress. You speak to align. And sometimes, you say nothing at all, not because you're withholding, but because silence holds more honesty than any explanation. Even your simplest acts take on new meaning. Making tea becomes a form of meditation. Watering your plants becomes a gesture of care, not just for the plant, but for the part of you that longs to nurture. When you walk slower. When you touch something, you feel it. When someone speaks, you hear the spaces between their words. Life becomes less about getting through the day and more about being in it fully, vulnerably, honestly. This is how remembrance becomes a lifestyle. Not a ritual done at dawn, not a weekend retreat, but a lived presence in every ordinary thing. You begin to ask, with quiet sincerity, am I doing this from my soul or from my programming? Am I present here or am I acting from habit? These questions are not criticisms. They are invitations to return, again and again, to your center. You also become more intentional with your attention. You begin to see how the things you watch, the words you absorb, the conversations you participate in are not neutral. They shape your inner frequency. They feed your inner fire. And so you start choosing more gently. You don't isolate. You refine. You create a sacred boundary not to close the world out, but to honor what you're building within. And when it comes to relationships, everything shifts. You no longer reach out of need, but from fullness. You no longer try to be liked. You simply bring your essence and allow others to meet you there. Or not. You begin to attract connections that speak the same language. Not because you try, but because resonance calls to resonance. And even in challenge, you don't collapse the way you used to. You may still feel pain. You may still fall. But something within you remains intact, awake, watching, guiding. You get back up not because you must, but because you know who you are. And yes, you will forget. There will be days when the noise returns, when you lose your rhythm, when old habits feel safer than truth. But the difference now is this: you notice. And when you notice, you return. That returning becomes a sacred rhythm, a quiet compass. And every time you return, you deepen. You no longer chase awakening as a destination. You begin to understand it as a way of walking, a way of cooking, a way of resting, a way of being with what is without needing to run or prove or perform. People around you might not understand what's changed. They might say, "You seem different," or "There's something calm about you." But what they're really noticing is your coherence. That rare frequency of someone who is no longer fragmented inside. Someone who lives what they remember. Someone who carries their soul not as a secret, but as a presence. And perhaps, without even trying, your way of being becomes permission for others. A quiet invitation to return to themselves. Because the soul doesn't preach, it simply shines. And that light, steady and true, does the real work. Awakening doesn't stay alive just because you felt it once. Like a candle. It needs tending. Like a melody. It needs rhythm. Not through force, but through devotion. Gentle, steady devotion. The soul doesn't ask for performance. It asks for presence. It doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to keep returning. So how do you keep remembering? Even in a world that wants you to forget. You begin by making silence a practice. Not just the absence of sound, but a silence that's full of attention. A moment in the morning, a pause in the afternoon. 3 conscious breaths before a conversation. Even 5 minutes of stillness can bring you back. In that space, your soul begins to echo again. Not as words, but as presence. Then you turn your actions into offerings. You don't just eat, you honor the food. You don't just walk, you arrive with every step. You don't just speak, you let your voice carry resonance. Even the smallest gestures, when done with awareness, become portals of remembrance. Washing dishes, holding someone's hand, looking up at the sky. These aren't mundane. They're sacred if you're fully there. You also become a guardian of what you allow in, not from fear but from wisdom, because your inner world is shaped by what surrounds you. The shows you watch, the conversations you join, the energy you invite. Begin to treat your attention like a temple. Not everything deserves entry, and when you feel the clutter building, return to your breath. to your body, to your stillness. Clean the energy gently. Speak less, but from deeper. Don't repeat what you've heard. Speak only what vibrates with truth inside you, even if it's quiet, even if it's simple. Because a single word from your soul carries more weight than 1,000 from your mind. And often, the most powerful resonance is not what you say, but how you are. And perhaps most importantly, live as if you already remember. Not to pretend, but to stay in tune. Walk like someone who carries an ancient truth inside them. Listen like someone who knows wisdom is everywhere. Love like someone who's been doing it for centuries. Because you have. Because your soul is older than time. The more you live in resonance, the easier it is to recognize when you slip out of it. Not as failure, but as feedback. And when you slip, you return. That returning is the sacred rhythm. You remember, you forget, you return, you deepen. That's the path. That's the practice. That's the life. And maybe now, as you sit here, something inside you feels quieter, not numb, just soft, present, a little more like yourself. If so, then this message has done its work. Not by giving you something new, but by helping you peel back what was never yours. Because the most sacred truths can't be taught. They can only be remembered. You were never broken, only buried. Never lost, only redirected. And now, the remembering has begun. This isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of a return. Not into something extraordinary, but into something deeply, quietly true. So let this be your rhythm. Let stillness be your compass. Let breath be your anchor. Let your presence be your prayer. And when the world gets loud again, when you forget, when you fall, don't be discouraged. Just notice, breathe, and return. Because you don't have to go anywhere to find your soul. You just have to stop running from it. You are not here to become. You are here to remember. And in this remembering, you come home. Welcome back.